Hey, welcome everybody. I see we've got a great attendance coming online. We're going to start just a couple minutes after 11:30 just to allow, we've got about 60 participants that have signed up. And so hold on tight and we're going to be starting the presentation shortly.
How many you got now?
We're right at 30, Phil. So let's give it, for those of you that just joined us, we're going to give it just a couple more minutes. We'll be starting right at around 11:32, just to give people time to sign on. And so we're looking forward to talking to you today, and we'll be starting in just a few minutes. Seeing a lot of friends from the printing industry signing on here. Good to see you all joining us this morning. All right, for those of you that just joined us, we're going to wait one more minute for the last few people to sign on. Had a great attendance today. See a lot of people from different roles throughout the Mid-Atlantic area in the print industry. So great to have everybody joining us today. All right, let's get started. So want to welcome everybody to the pajama, the reset, building the pipeline during COVID-19. These have been a little bit crazy times right now. And so want to introduce you to Phil Gray with Pajama to say a few words. So Phil, you want to kick us off?
I appreciate it, and I'd like to welcome everybody for joining in today. Briefly, I just wanted to let people know what our summer schedule is looking like, and towards the fall. Because of COVID-19, we've canceled all of our live events, so we're doing everything virtually, and we're hoping that this is going to be kind of a new way of being able to do some things anyway. But August the 25th through the 27th, mark that on your calendar. It's a 3-day event called Reevaluate Printing. It's going to be run by a lady named Deborah Korn, and it's a series of seminars that you'll be able to pick from over that 3-day period. Take a look at it when you see the advertisements for it and see if there's something there that you're interested in. September the 2nd, I'm sorry, August the 4th, I missed that one. We're actually going to put on the Maryland legislative update, and this will be taking a look at 2021 in the state of Maryland. Then September the 2nd will be the Road to Recovery with Adrienne Harrison. She is the VP of HR for the new Print United Alliance. There'll be more information coming out about that. And right now in the planning stages for the fall, we're talking to a paper mill about the possibility of a mini series that should be of real interest to printers and designers. And then September the 15th, Jim Morgan and I will be back on with a follow-up to today's program and more about sales in this particular environment. So at that all being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jim because this is a 1-hour program and I want to give him the maximum amount of time. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Phil. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you and especially Jay Goldshare for putting this on with Pajama. I've always found that during challenging times, it was great to have kind of the association there to be able to provide insight and support and guidance and some of those legislative things and insight into what's going on state and locally. So certainly appreciate Pajama and all that that you have done. As Phil mentioned, I'm Jim Morgan. Many of you may know me. I see a lot of familiar names in the audience today. I've spent 35 years in the printing and graphics industry, starting with a paper company and then going into a local printer here in the Washington, D.C. area, really working my way from sales management, operations, COO, eventually part of the ownership team, as well as president and COO of the organization. And during that time, over the 35 years, experienced a lot of challenges, maybe none quite so much like the current COVID challenge we're having, but certainly had seen our share of downturns. And so in each of those roles, salesperson, owner, sales manager, you have a little bit different perspective as to how do you go about tackling that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. This current pandemic and the accompanying quarantine have really had significant impact, not only on the printing industry, but on all of the industries that are out there. It's a challenge that not only are we experiencing economic downturn, but also from a sales and business development standpoint, trying to reach out to people when they are working from home, and a large part of it, of the population is working from home. I know that over the past few months, most of you have been dealing with all those important strategic issues, looking at the finances and what do we need to do from a financial standpoint, reevaluating who our workforce and what's the right mix and what's the right mix of sales team, getting those PPP funds and looking at those unique opportunities that I know some of you have been able to leverage that these challenges present, as well as looking at current customers and helping those current customers figure out how do we deal with projects that had been planned now that we have a shutdown. So those are things that you've been doing and want to talk about today, now here 5 months into COVID-19. It's critical that we re-engage and look at that client acquisition strategy. How are we going to build that pipeline back up? I'd like to say that I have a silver bullet. I know that some of you that have contacted me before this you're going to have that silver bullet, that one magic pill that we can take in order to be able to solve all of these challenges. And I'm sorry to say that I don't have a silver bullet, but what I have learned, having gone through several downturns, is that people that tend to succeed and even thrive during these have a couple things in common. So I want to frame our conversation today with those three things as a starting point. So first, most people that really start to succeed and get out of this become very disciplined about their prospecting fundamentals. They get back to some of the sales basics. And so while we're going to talk a little bit about how those might be nuanced in today's environment, we are going to be talking about what does a good, solid pipeline strategy, what's our methodology for being able to get new things into the pipeline. The second thing that I see that people that succeed and thrive really focus on is they really reach out and become very connected with their prospects and customers and understanding how is the situation impacting them? What are they trying to achieve and what are the challenges they have? And then they identify opportunities to help those prospects achieve those outcomes. And so that combination of being very disciplined, being customer focused, and then looking for opportunities during these challenging times kind of frames our conversation for today. So our agenda that we're going to be looking at is, first, we're going to be talking about sales management and what you must do. Now, I want to make a caveat there that just if you're not in sales management, that doesn't mean that you don't want to listen to these things, because for many of us, we are our own salesperson, sales manager, owner. And for, some, it's the, these are still things that all of us need to consider. We're going to then talk about how do we set ourselves apart from the competition during these times. And then we're going to look at what do we need to do to improve that pipeline? How do we get back to some of those basics, and what nuances might we need to do in order to be able to really thrive during this time? So let's start off with those sales managers. Now, let me just make a point on here. I should have told you that unfortunately, because of the numbers, we've had great numbers today, that we're not going to be able to have as much or interaction as far as you being able to speak and ask questions, but you are going to be able to ask questions through the question button. So if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, there should be a question button there. Feel free to click on that, ask questions, and I'm going to pause after each of these 3 sections to see what questions you might have and if I can answer some of those questions. So let's talk about those sales managers. So I love this picture because I think it's the picture that represents what a lot of the people I'm talking to from a sales management standpoint feel like. They're kind of holding their heads, and everyone's looking to them as to what they should do. And many of them are struggling to figure out what is exactly should I be doing. So I want to just put out a few things there that where you can help your organization continue to build that pipeline to get through this. So one of the first things that you want to do, if I can get mine, there we go. One of the first things you want to do is to really leverage all of your assets. Now, when I'm saying this, when you look within your organization, there's nothing more important than right now making sure that the entire organization understands that they are part of the growth engine. Your salespeople obviously are important and critical part of that, but what can your customer service people be doing? How many people have more direct contact with previous customers or with customers than delivery? What about your accounting? What about HR? And so this is not only looking at them and leveraging them as to what they can be doing from an outreach standpoint, but also looking at them and leveraging them from a relationship standpoint. So many of them have relationships either in outside of the people that they typically work with. And so how can we use those to garner referrals? How can we use those to get good information? Maybe your HR person is active in a association for other HR. Can we talk to them and get some insights on what's going on in the HR world and how we might be able to service that? Or same thing from accounting, association. How do we get contacts out there with the market and using our entire organization to leverage that? And you as sales manager need to be able to provide that. Now, this is something that I almost didn't talk about, but in several of the sales managers, there's been this understanding that, hey, I need to create a sense of urgency. These are desperate times. Our sales are at 30%, 50%, 60% of what they typically were. And so I want to create a sense of urgency. And I agree that we want to make sure that the sales team understands what the numbers are they need to hit. And we certainly want to make sure that the sales team understands that the organization is relying on them to help us get through this. But we want to do that in such a way that we're motivating, not paralyzing them. So we want to create a sense of urgency. We don't want to create a sense of panic. So as a sales manager, your role is not only to make sure that there's accountability, that we're continuing to progress from that standpoint, but your also role is to stand alongside the sales rep, motivate them, help keep them excited about what opportunities there are out there, because there's probably never been a more difficult time from a sales standpoint than right now. The third thing I want you to think about is how do you become more agile? When I think back through some of the downturns in 2008 and during 2000 and even going back to the 80s and 90s, one of the things that those were times that because we were able to act quickly, we were able to add on new products. We were able to service markets that we hadn't served before. And those were pivot points in us continuing to grow. And so part of being more agile as a sales manager is how do you up your cadence that you're having with your sales reps? Now is not the time to be canceling one-on-ones. Now is probably the time to have a daily stand-up to make sure everybody's clear on what we're trying to accomplish today. Having those regular one-on-ones, increasing the level of communication. And that's two-way communication. That's not only communication for us to the sales reps, but what we really want is we want to be talking to the sales reps, the customer service people, anyone that's in touch with the client or prospective client to get us feedback, so that as we see there's trends or when we see there's opportunities, we can pivot quickly as needed in order to be able to serve those markets that we might not have served otherwise. Now, I know I've talked to several of you, and I know that there's people that have already done this, which is reevaluate your markets. You know, there are certain clients that you have that are still continuing to be active. We work with a lot of IT companies here and government contractors in the Washington, D.C. area, and they're very active. They're still almost business as usual. But there's other organizations like some of your association markets that's struggling, or some of these others. So we want to understand who are the accounts that are active and how do we get in front of them, do some account planning, nurturing those. But then who are those clients that are potentially in decline, and where are there opportunities for us to come up with ideas on how we can help them with their business challenges. And then now's the time that both from a market standpoint and a product standpoint, we may need to make that pivot. So if your business has traditionally been focused on some of those markets that have really been struggling, now's the time that we may need to be looking at where are the other markets that are active? How do I take the skill sets that I have over here and bring them to this new market? And looking at the opportunities out there. I know that some of the people that are online have done a great job of really pivoting and being able to find opportunities to provide PPE equipment. I know one company that's really pushed forward and used their distribution in order to up their JanSan, their janitorial and sanitation side of the business, which has really made up for some of the other lack of the business. So how do we look at those and pivot both to new markets as well as to potentially new products? Now, this one sounds obvious. We need to become externally focused, but I can tell you that there's a lot of people I've talked to, certainly in the early days of this, that were more in hunker down mode than externally focused mode. They were focused on internally, what do we need to do? And now's the time to make that pivot. And as a sales manager, you really need to set the example for your team. You want to make sure that what can you do to get out in front of good current clients and understand exactly what challenges they're having. What can we do for them? How do you get in touch with previous clients, even those that haven't worked with us for 2-3 years, in order to see what's going on in their marketplace and where are their opportunities? What challenges are they having? Obviously, you want to be there for prospects. But now we finally started to see the turn as well, events like this where you can talk to other people in the industry. How do we share insights on and help each other to understand exactly what needs to be done? Where is their success? Where isn't there success? But also in the market, just in the last probably 6 weeks or so, we've seen all of the Chamber of Commerce, some of the CEO groups that get together, a lot of the peer groups that are out there. How do you get affiliated again with the American Marketing Association or SHRM or ASAE, those different groups that are now doing virtual events, to really understand what's going on within their markets and where are the opportunities? The next one, which is certainly from a sales management standpoint the most important, which is you need to spend more time coaching. It's astonishing that even in a recent HubSpot poll, 15% of sales managers spend 15% of their time coaching their team. Now, we know from research from groups like Objective Management Group that sales managers that are at the top of their game, that have high performing teams, typically spend close to double that coaching their sales team. And now's the time when your sales team and even your customer service team may be struggling, and more than ever, you need to invest your time, a large portion of your time. I would say probably close to 40% of your time at least should be spent in those one-on-ones and ad hoc coaching and team meeting, giving your team the tools that they need in order to be able to be successful. Now, you might say, what are the things that I need to coach on? And I would say that those fall into certain categories. So one, how do we target valuable prospects? How are we, as we're going through that pivot, helping the sales reps understand what are good targets for them to go after? During times when pipeline is thin, salespeople frequently spend a disproportionate time on bad opportunities. They don't have a lot in their pipeline, and so they hang on to and invest too much of their time on things that probably aren't good fit or low margin. So helping them disqualify some of those opportunities as well. Helping them to rewrite and look at the scripts. Now, I know some of you use scripts, some of you don't, but I will say now, when there's a lot riding on the conversations we're having, helping your salespeople have good COVID questions. What are some of the questions that we can ask around impact that organizations are having because of COVID, and having clear scripts that they can articulate as far as at least talking points. So when they're going into meetings, they're not at a loss. Then also helping them strategize opportunities. And so because opportunities may be less and less, and because you're going to be looking for how do you get a bigger piece of a smaller pie, you really need to be strategic in that. And then finally, how do you spend more time role playing? Now, some of you are going to roll your eyes, but I will say from a sales management standpoint, and even from a salesperson standpoint, one of the best things that you can do is role play a conversation. We have great technology now. We're all getting very used to Zoom calls. And I've been working with a lot of clients where they are videotaping their call. You can just use the camera on your computer, videotape the conversation the way you think it's going to go, listen to that, and you'll see lots of ways that you can help your team, or as a salesperson, ways that you can improve. So from a sales management standpoint, leveraging all the assets, the entire organization, creating a sense of urgency, being agile, increasing that communication, reevaluating your market and where you're going after, and then really spending a lot of time coaching as well. Now, let's look at how we all can set apart and from the competition. So I'm just checking to see, I don't see that we have any questions right now. So I'm going to go on to this next section. But again, if you want to ask any questions, I'll try to answer them throughout, and there will be an opportunity to answer questions at the end. Now, all of us are trying to figure out what can we do to separate ourselves from the competition. And I want to talk through a few quick points before we get into the real pipeline side of things. So now's the time more than ever to be customer centric. Now, I hear people that say, well, Jim, I am customer centric, but as soon as they open their mouth, I'm hearing the things that they're saying, and it's about me, and it's about what I do, and it's about the things that, that I look to sell. And when we're starting conversations now, we really want to show empathy. Everybody's been impacted. Let's learn about how people are impacted. Let's lead by listening. As salespeople, listening is frequently a lost art, but it's probably the most important skill that you can develop if you're going to try to find ways to differentiate yourself from those people that come in and just show up and throw up about their features, the products that they're doing. And so really making sure that we are leveraging those listening skills. So seek first to understand, as Stephen Covey would say, and then to be understood. And then I think it's a good exercise. Anybody that you're going to go out and see, taking a step back and thinking about, if I were in their position in this organization during these times, what would I be concerned about? What are the top things that I would be worried about? And getting really clear on what the client point of view would be. The next one is being outcome focused. And this is one where I would say that when I see successful people in the printing and graphics market, frequently they're people that talk from an outcome standpoint as opposed from a product standpoint. So when I would ask many people as to what is it that you do, I hear that we produce brochures, we do wide format, we do training materials, we maybe do apps, we provide paper. And most people don't stand up or wake up in the morning. Most of our clients don't wake up in the morning and say, boy, I really need a wide format sign today, or I really need a brochure today. So we need to look at what's the outcome that our clients are trying to drive. Most of them in their roles, whether that be from a marketing standpoint, a COO standpoint, they are trying to increase revenue. They're trying to engage with an employee, especially now during these times when there's so many people working from home. A lot of companies are trying to figure out what's a different way for us to engage with our employees. They're trying to engage with their donors, their constituents, their members. And so looking for ways and opportunities where we can use the tools that we have from a print standpoint to do that. They're looking to promote brands. They're looking to inform, educate, and train. This is typically a time when, if we are doing this live, as we originally had planned to do, we'd be asking you for what are the things that you see that clients are driving towards. And I'm sure that we get some great answers. But when you are looking and talking to a customer, let's look from an outcome standpoint. What are they trying to achieve? An exercise that I frequently will take clients through when we're working with a particular prospect is, if they're doing that mailing or they're doing that brochure, who's the target audience? What are they hoping to get out of that? They're trying to get 5 new members. What's the value of 5 new members? Wow, so that means they're trying to get $120,000 worth of revenue. When we understand the value that they're trying to drive and what the outcome is, then at times we can actually recommend solutions that are slightly more expensive if we can get a better outcome. And so this is where we start getting into business conversations as opposed to product services conversations. And to that point, it's all about conversations. It's not about presentations. And so while, yes, we want to be making sure we have good talking points, we're going to be preparing some scripts, and we would be maybe even videotaping ourselves to make sure that we are doing it properly. At the end of the day, once we engage with that customer, once we engage with that prospect, we want to be focused on having good conversations. Most people don't want to be sold, but they absolutely want to have their problem solved. And so where can you share insights? What things and information can you give before you start to look at getting? This is an area where I know that some of you have done a great job, especially utilizing social media as part of your content give, as part of your engaging with prospects or engaging with organizations before you actually engage with them from a how can we solve their problems. There's at least 1 or 2 companies online here that I know do a great job of sharing social media content that is not only print specific, but is business specific. And so it's creating that conversation around what are you trying to do to help them become better businesses to achieve their results. And once we start that conversation, then we can see, is there a place where we can truly add value? And to that point, it's important for all of us to understand our value. When I ask companies, especially in this market, what is it that's your differentiators? How are you different from other people? They frequently struggle, or they give me sound bites that I question, are those sound bites that are really going to be valuable to the end user? So they talk about their years of service, their local, the fact that they maybe have pickup delivery, or they talk about different things that when you look across the area, there are a lot of organizations that have those same. So really want to look at, what are your current clients? Why do they turn to you? What are the problems that they look to you to solve? How are you different from your competition, and how are you specifically as a salesperson or business person different from the other people that they're going to be dealing with? What's your special sauce? So I want to give you a homework assignment. I know we're kind of right at the midway point here, but I want to give you a homework assignment that you should really be spending some time in the next couple of days thinking about. And that would be around what is understanding your value. I'm going to ask you to try to think of 4 questions. You should be able to, if I said, give me 3 things that differentiate your organization, those should come right off the top of your head as to how you truly are different from other organizations like you in the marketplace. If I were to ask you, what are the 3 things that you do differently as a salesperson, you should be able to articulate that how the experience of working with you is going to be different from working with other salespeople in your marketplace. If you're struggling finding those, the next 2 things are activities that I think would help you find that. So call your most loyal client, or maybe 1 or 2 of your most loyal clients, those people that you've worked with for years, and ask them, what is it that you do? What is it that your organization does that makes them want to work with you? What is it, the things that they really find as being valuable? And If they're long-term clients, they're going to be pretty honest about that. You could even ask them, what are some of the challenges in working with you, so you can look for areas for improvement as well. And then ask some of your newest clients, why did they turn to you when solving those problems? What are the things that they felt like you were above and beyond the other vendors or the other partners out there? So that's your homework assignment. I'm going to send you, this is one of the things, I'm going to send you many things after the webinar, but this is one of the things that I'll send you as a reminder for you to do in determining what your value is. I'm also going to send you something that allows you to take that information and start putting it into a little bit tighter value statement or elevator pitch that gives you the ability to be able to articulate in such a way that it's not about what you produce and more about the experience or the value or the problems that you solve for other people. So I'm going to pause there for a minute, and I'm going to ask my assistant, Truett, were there any questions that we need to answer along the way now? Okay, great. I saw one pop up there, but it sounds like not yet, so we're good. So we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about building that pipeline. And this is an area where it's difficult. You know, it's difficult during the best of times. It's certainly difficult when we are looking for how do we go about trying to generate revenue during a very difficult time when there's not only is there not as much work as there used to be, access becomes a problem as well. So I'm going to put this slide up there for a minute and just want to talk to you about it. I know there's a lot of information, and those of you that have been in my webinars before have certainly seen this. This is kind of this is our customer acquisition slide. And while we're not talking about marketing and sales and the relationship between marketing and sales, certainly when it comes to filling the top of that pipeline, marketing and sales both play an important part. You see at the top of there that, you know, marketing's role is what are the things that they can do to help execute through content emails, through webinars, through events, certainly a lot of social media that's going out. From the sales side, we're typically looking at where are the things that we can do from calling directly or getting introductions and referrals and working from a networking standpoint. And yes, there are networking events going on right now that can be valuable. But right now, we're going to talk about this very center part, which is what is a salesperson? What's the process that we're going to take in order to be able to increase that pipeline? And that's what we call the TRPE process, that TRPE. So let's take a look a little bit deeper at that. So normally, if you have a sales process, you know, the very beginning of that is either a suspect or a prospect stage. And so that TRPE stands for targeting, research, planning, and execution. Now, why is that so important? Because there are so many people that get this part wrong. They jump right from the, oh, I see somebody's name on the top of the building, to let me pick up the phone and try to call them. And when they actually call them, they don't provide a lot of value. And so we're going to dive a little bit into these 4 stages and then talk a little bit about how they might be different under the current conditions. So normally, targeting, this is where we're trying to define the fit. Who are our best customers? What do they look like? What do they care about? What are their sizes? Where are they located? We're defining some criteria that we're going to go out and look for other organizations that match that criteria, or other organizations that have similar challenges. And so, you know, certainly looking at a defined number of those. Now, one of the things that's different now during COVID is that typically you are doing this on a quarterly basis. Part of being more agile during this time frame is how do you look at your targets and refresh them probably more in a 6-week cycle or a 4-week cycle to make sure you've got enough coming into the funnel. The next thing we have is that research, and we're going to go a little bit into this, but this is the how do you get the information you need to really present and to provide value right up front. There's no excuse for us not to do good research, and that's about company, decision landscape, individuals, industry trends. What are we seeing out there? Who's the competition? Not our competition, but who is their competition? How are they positioning themselves against the competition? The next one is the that planning. So what are we doing to create what we call the hypothesis of need? From the research, we should be able to look at this and see how do we go about developing that hypothesis of need. So that's the base off of other customers that we've worked with. You know, who are the people, or what are the challenges that we've solved for those, and why would they want to talk to this? This is where we start creating our meeting justification. We're refining that script specifically towards that person in that organization. And then we go about executing it. How do we go about trying to execute on that? So I'm going to take a pause here for a minute, and we've got a brief survey. And so I want to ask the question, Truett, can you put that survey up? So there's going to be a brief survey that you can, if you would, go ahead and answer. And so the poll is open. Hopefully you're seeing the poll. And the question is about how much time are you spending prospecting? So give it another minute. Okay, go ahead and close that poll out, Truett. Okay. So we're still collecting a few responses. How many hours do you spend prospecting? All right, our poll is closed. And so the answer or the results, so we had 54% said they spend 5 to 10 hours prospecting. 33% spent less than 4 hours. So if you look at that, that's 87% of the people on this call. We've got just about 40, a little over 40 people on the call who said that they spend less than 10 hours a week in prospecting. So that's about 2 hours or less per day. Hats off to those of you that are in that 4% that said 20 hours or plus. Now, when we're talking about prospecting, that's really doing all of these different activities. That's talking about time spent on targeting, the research, the planning, execution. And let's face it, right now, there's not a lot of time that you're spent working on projects in the shop. So there's very few things that are more important than you being able to prospect at this point in time. So, Truett, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. So let's take a little bit deeper dive into what the different steps in and how these might be different right now. So first is that targeting. Like I said, typically we'd only be doing this about once a quarter, and you know, right now for new, what we want to look at is what markets do we serve well? Where do we find more of those people? Sometimes it's the type of market. So if we are good at providing data communications to one particular type of group, where are there other groups that are like that? What markets are active right now? I know that we have some active markets have gone away, some markets have become very active. And so how do you go after those, and how do you pivot to go after those? And who values the things that we've determined are your value and differentiators? So on the new side, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to target a certain population of organizations that we're going to go after. Then on existing, you know, we need to be very close to the existing clients as well. And so part of that is, how do we expand existing relationships? I talk to a lot of people that that are working with HR, but they're not working with marketing, or they're not working with operations, or they're working with fairly low, but they haven't worked their way up through the organization. And I would say that as you're getting better at articulating your value, as you're getting better at having more business conversations as opposed to spec conversations, then it's more important than ever for you to move up the food chain. And so frequently the people that we're working with that might be in purchasing or that might be marketing are not the people that are concerned about the return on investment or what's the impact, financial impact of what we do can have on those organizations. And the last line here, each rep must identify X. So what is the right number for you to be identifying in order for you to have good targets? We would typically say that that's probably 15 to 20 organizations every quarter. One of the biggest mistakes that people do from a sales standpoint is they work on too many, and so they get themselves into that plate spinning mode where they're doing a little bit of activity on a few, or on lots of things and not going deep enough on any one. And so I would say that that's probably now more around that number per 6 weeks. So how do we refresh that and look at every 6 weeks, who's the next 20 that we're really going to do an all-out effort in order to be able to drive value and to be able to generate revenue. Now let's talk about research. This is what separates super performers from average performers, and it's the way that they're able to take their research and plan it in order to be able to provide insights during their pursuits. Nobody wants to have someone just call to check in or call just to see if you have any work, but you can add value if you're understanding the organization and what their current state is. If you're developing based off of that and what we're seeing is going on in that organization, what might be a meeting justification? Why would they want to talk to us? And so developing that messaging around that. What are the risks and challenges that they're having as an organization, and what outcomes are they trying to drive to? Then the final thing is, as we're looking at it, what's the right point of entry? And this is another area where I think salespeople sometimes miss an opportunity, and that they go after one point of entry until that completely is dead and dried up. And then they go after the next one, and then they go after the next one, as opposed to looking at and saying, hey, in some of these organizations, I can try to hit 3 entry points at once and try to get into that organization and expand. The end goal of all of this is developing an understanding as to what value do we bring to the table, how can we differentiate. Now, in this marketplace, we can pretty much understand that most associations are trying to find ways to engage with their clients or try to capture revenue that's been lost. Most organizations are trying to figure out how they can engage with employees who are at home. If they're working with events, they're trying to figure out, okay, I can move that event virtually, but is there a component of that that I can make that's more tactile and engaging in addition to the virtual? And those are conversations that I've certainly had with some people in those areas. And so we want to be looking at what are the things that we can do now during this time frame. One of the things I want to send to you along with the email after this is this research template. And it explains kind of the areas of information that you want to gather and what you want to do with that. And so hopefully you'll find that valuable as you start looking at who are your top prospects. So this is another homework assignment. Take 2 to 3 top prospects that you're going after. Fill out this. If you're able to fill out this research template, it should start giving you an idea as to what is it that they'd want to talk to me about? How do I get in front of them, engage with them? Now that we've got our research done, it should give us enough information for us to determine what's the topic of interest that we're going to go after. Who are we going to talk to first to get into those organizations? What are those entry points? We're going to determine what script we're going to be using, and we're going to modify that so that it is specific not only to that organization, but maybe even specific to that person. In today's world with LinkedIn, we can do enough research to find out, is there a common connector? Is there a referral that we can get in there? What are their interests? And is there a way for us to target that message much more specifically? So once we start executing, it's about, do we want to go after that introduction, which is always better to have someone introduce? Referrals have, it's an incredible percentage higher success rate than going in cold or going in warm with the research that you have. So trying to figure out what's the best approach there. Our goal, it's important to understand, is to set a call for a video conference. In this day and age, now people aren't going to see you in person, or a few people are going to see you in person. There are certain industries that we're still meeting with in person and that have not stopped, but a lot of them you're trying to set up a video call or a conference. The goal of the phone call is not to sell, it's to provide enough value that they're going to want to have a longer conversation with you. Now, it may take you multiple, I think the statistics now say it takes a little over 8 contacts in order to be able to get someone on the phone or get someone's attention. So we recommend that you're going to try probably 8 days in a row reaching out to them, or 12 attempts in 3 days. Try call at different times. Try different methods, as well. We typically rely on calls, but in this environment, this is where I'm seeing success in well-crafted, very short and to the point emails can be effective as well. I put on this on here, if you are calling, if you're like me, frequently you're in back-to-back video conferences from 7 o'clock until early afternoon. And so a recent study that I saw, I think this was HubSpot as well, said that the best time for prospecting or getting prospects right now is between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursdays. That's different from what we had heard several years ago, where Tuesdays was one of the best days, but now they're saying Thursday is the best day, Wednesday is the second best day in that 4 to 5 time frame. And so another thing that I certainly have found is that since people are going from meeting to meeting, that 10 to the hour is an open time where people are much more available. So we've gone through a lot of information as far as the TRPE process, that discipline of prospecting. It is going to be challenging right now. Certainly, there are ways to get in front of people, but the biggest differentiator you can do is, number one, really have a discipline around the amount of time that you're spending on these different aspects. Number two, really understand things from the customer's point of view. Try to get to understand what are the challenges. People are going to be much more engaging with you if you're asking them questions or you're trying to pull them in when you're talking about the challenges, the problems that they're having, and you're understanding things from their point of view. And then try to provide some insight or look for where are the opportunities where you as an organization can help them solve those problems. What's the differentiator and value that you might bring to that table? Now, one of the things that Phil asked me when we were talking about doing this is, Jim, this seems like a terrible time to do this because we're in the middle of the summer. And what you're seeing right now is a typical customer acquisition lifestyle cycle here in the Washington, D.C. area. We tend to have 3 strong sprints: the January to March sprint, the April to June sprint, and the September to November sprint. Now, I know that some of you that service education organizations have much more activity in the July-August timeframe, but typically July is more of a reset time, and August is kind of a preparing. But I will say that this cycle has been somewhat pushed because of COVID, and people are looking to start getting back into work. So August is the perfect time to get out, start building relationships, start getting your information out there, getting content out there, engaging with people so that you can start building that connection for when things start getting busier in September. I know we need revenue right now, but when you start having these conversations, that's when you're going to start seeing more and more opportunities come about. So I've talked for a long time. I wish this was interactive and that we were in person to where we could certainly get more connection and workshops. As Phil had said, we're planning on doing another one of these to go deeper into, we're going to send you a survey as to what areas would you like to have more tactical, how-to information. We're looking to do that on that September 15th date. And then we're looking at the following month. Hopefully by then we'll be able to do some live events. It's a little bit more of a workshop type event where we can actually get into your details. So I've talked a lot. I want to open it up for questions. And so you should have a question box there. If you want to put any questions you might have or anything that you want clarification on. And Truett, I'm not seeing where the questions are popped. Here. So one of the questions was, will I be providing a copy of the slide deck? Absolutely, we're going to be sending out a copy of the slide deck and can send the video as well. Another question from Jack Weber. Most customers will not meet during COVID, and I have been very successful at doing business on the phone or by email. So he's been very successful. He's saying he's been very successful. That's great if you've been very successful. One of the things I would say is that all of us are getting much more adept at the video conference calls. And so with that, I will say that they're open. Most customers that I'm talking to, if you have a good value proposition, if you have a reason for them to want to meet with you, they're willing to take time out. Don't ask for an hour, ask for 15 minutes, ask for 20 minutes. Can you intrigue them enough or provide enough value that you get a longer extension of time from that? And so glad to hear that you're having success via phone and email. A lot of the people that we're talking to have really struggled with that. And so there are some techniques to be used for that as well. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions pop up, so that's great. I want to thank all of you for being a part of the webinar. Again, would love to be able to make it more interactive next time. Our numbers that we got up to were just a little bit prohibitive to have everybody on screen. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for your time today. Wait, I got one last question. Tina Cross, we have Zoom conference client meetings. I mail or drop off samples and request the same from them before the meeting. That's great that you're doing that. And one of the nice things about video, I've seen a lot of people sharing samples on video as well. And so that's a great way to be able to actually, you can see exactly what's going on there as well. So with that, we are right at time. So I want to thank you all for the time that you've had today. I look forward to connecting. Also in the email I'm going to send out, there'll be a link there if you want to have a 15 to 30-minute conversation with me to answer any questions more specifically, because we couldn't do it in this format. Just click on that. You can schedule a time, and I look forward to connecting and talking to you all. So have a great day.